Subcommittee will come to order. Good morning and welcome to everyone. Chairman Bonomack has personal business in California today, and it is going to prevent her from joining us, and we look forward to her quick return next week. So I would like to begin today, as I said, by welcoming each of you and by yielding myself time for an opening statement. I do want to thank our expert witnesses for joining us as we examine vehicle safety provisions in the House and the Senate highway bills. We're honored to have our esteemed colleague, Congressman Lewis, with us for our first panel. Administrator Strickland, we welcome you. For our second panel, and several stakeholders whose industries and interests are central to today's hearing. The American people believe the auto industry can grow and prosper without diminishing our efforts to make our highways safer. These aren't mutually exclusive goals, and they don't need to be if we have the right approach. The history of the last 2 decades of highway safety demonstrates that industry-developed technology combined with federal oversight and enforcement by NHTSA has continually reduced the number of fatalities to near record lows as collective vehicle travel rates continue to increase. Transportation is fundamental to our everyday lives, and highway safety deserves our special attention. The safety of our roads is important, and it's in everyone's best interest. Interstate commerce, our economy, and families rely on the ability to travel safely in order to conduct business, earn a living, and carry out their daily activities. With safety always in the forefront of our minds, we ought to ensure our motor vehicle safety policies are framed in a way that ensures economic flexibility and efficiency for business, as well as regulatory caution and reduced uncertainty for the auto manufacturing industry. Regarding flexibility and efficiency, we know that America is a haven for innovators and that safety is something many consumers look for when purchasing a vehicle or traveling with a commercial bus or motor coach company. Accidents on our roadways are not only an immediate danger to the passengers involved, but also a major setback for industry, potentially harming a small business's productivity and safety reputation. It is in the industry's best interest to incorporate safety features into their vehicles and business models, and they have the expertise to understand that safety features work, how they will work, how they interact, and how quickly they can be implemented. We need to consider the best ways to incentivize safety, to be flexible and respectful of the processes that exist, to better understand what works best for safety for our economy and the transportation systems. Regarding caution and certainty, we must exercise prudence before assuming the federal government knows best. Simply placing more mandates and regulations on industry, especially without proven safety benefits, will not help us reach any of our shared goals for safe travel. Let's avoid regulatory whiplash by narrowly targeting our efforts on true harms. Determining proven ways to make the biggest impact in reducing crashes on our roads needs to take precedence. At the same time, we need to understand what tools and resources can be offered to improve transportation safety without growing the size of the federal government and place additional cost on consumers. Businesses need certainty, and employees deserve to know their jobs aren't at risk because of ill-conceived federal regulations. I look forward to hearing from each of our witnesses today about their views on the state of safety within their respective industries, how safety might be improved, and whether there is a role for the federal government to help those efforts. With the recent passage of the Senate Transportation Bill, I'm also interested to learn how provisions in the Commerce title of Map 21 will affect safety and any concerns our witnesses may have with the legislation as proposed. Thank you for your time, and I would like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Butterfield, for his opening statement.
Let me thank you, Madam Chairman. Let me thank the chairman of the subcommittee who's not here today, but thank her for her leadership on this subcommittee and thank her for her friendship. Let me also thank Congressman John Lewis for coming today. John Lewis is no stranger to any of us who serve in this Congress, and I want to thank him and welcome him to this subcommittee, as well as the administrator and other witnesses who are waiting to testify this morning. We have an 11 o'clock vote, I'm told, and so I'm going to try to expedite my statement and make sure that all of our witnesses can be heard. This committee has a long history of working together to advance vehicle safety, and I'm hopeful that we can continue to be a part of that history today. Deaths from vehicle incidents have declined significantly and are at their lowest point in 60 years. Those who are here today as witnesses should be proud of their role in making that happen. However, far too many Americans still lose loved ones when they are drivers or passengers of an automobile. It is our job today, in my opinion, to ensure that we continue to make progress in this area. And today we will discuss the Senate-passed Surface Transportation Bill, as well as the version of the Surface Transportation Bill reported to the House floor. Included in these measures are a number of provisions related to passenger and motor coach safety that fall under the jurisdiction of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Rising gas prices and the economic recession have forced some people away from traveling in cars, and instead some opt to travel by motor coach. And these large intercity buses transport large numbers of passengers over long distances with a less expensive price tag, but those buses often lack key safety features like seat belts, use of advanced glazing technology that makes windows stronger and therefore less likely to break and eject passengers in the event of a crash, and strong roofs to protect passengers from being crushed in a rollover. And these safety improvements can help keep passengers safer and ultimately save lives. I'm very pleased, again, that Congressman John Lewis from the great state of Georgia is here today to speak about his bill, H.R. 837, the Motor Coach Enhanced Safety Act of 2011, which was included as a part of the Senate Highway Bill. I strongly support Mr. Lewis's efforts and hope that Motor Coach Enhanced Safety Act will become law, either as a standalone bill or part of a larger legislative package. I recently authored an amendment to H.R. 7, which I'm hopeful can be supported on a bipartisan basis, dealing with odometer fraud at online auctions, and I'm pleased that the Senate bill included stiffer penalties for people who violate federal odometer reporting requirements. I hope that it will serve as a deterrent to those who defraud unsuspecting consumers to the tune of over $1 billion annually, according to a 2002 study. There are roughly 260 million motor vehicles on the road in the U.S. today. The safety and security of passengers traveling in those vehicles on American roads should be paramount to policymakers, regulators, and the auto industry alike. It is clear that auto manufacturers agree. They have demonstrated their commitment to safety by continuously innovating and creating new technological features such as anti-lock brakes and stability controls. I know we can work together to get those excellent safety features on all vehicles in a timely manner. Congressman Blackburn, I hope we can ultimately pass a long-term highway bill with strong safety provisions for both passenger vehicles as well as motor coaches so that the American roads are safer for all of us. I appreciate the witnesses being here today, and I look forward to their testimony. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. At this time, I recognize our full committee chairman, Mr. Upton, for 5 minutes to give his opening statement.
Well, thank you, thank you, Madam Chair. And knowing that the votes have been moved up, I'm going to ask to insert my statement into the record to expedite the process. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you. And at this time, I recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ranking Member Butterfield for holding this hearing. In the last Congress, our committee examined massive Toyota recalls and the government's slow response to sudden unintended acceleration. We examined the reforms needed at NHTSA. The committee passed the Motor Vehicle Safety Act, which I introduced to make sure NHTSA has the expertise to keep pace with emerging technologies and stronger enforcement authority to ensure timely and effective recalls. Many of the provisions of this bill are included in the bipartisan Senate Transportation Bill, and I'd like to thank Chairman Rockefeller and Pryor, the Senate sponsors of the provisions, for their leadership in moving this legislation forward. The Senate bill includes provisions to improve electronics expertise at NHTSA. It also mandates new safety standards to reduce the risk of sudden acceleration, as well as standards for electronics systems performance. The bill includes measures to improve accountability with a higher cap on civil penalties and a requirement that auto safety officials certify the accuracy of information given to the agency. The bill has improvements in the area of transparency. It would give consumers easier access to recall information, safety bulletins prepared by manufacturers, and the early warning data companies submit to help NHTSA identify defect trends. All of these provisions are similar to ones we considered in this committee last Congress, and they're all important safety measures. In addition, the Senate reauthorization bill requires important new standards for child safety seats and booster seats in particular. It has mandates for strong motor coach safety standards that are desperately needed but have languished at NHTSA for years. I'd like to thank my colleague, Congressman John Lewis, for his steadfast efforts to press for action on this issue. Let me close by thanking Administrator Strickland for his testimony today. Your leadership, along with Secretary LaHood, has re-energized the agency. While we take great pride in the sustained decline in vehicle fatalities, we must continue to look for opportunities to save more lives. I'd like to now yield the balance of my time to our colleague, Ms. Schakowsky.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I want to reiterate that the Senate has passed a transportation bill that has a number of key safety provisions that will keep consumers safe, including children. Mr. Waxman named some of them. I also wanted to highlight a study and potentially a rulemaking on systems that could warn drivers that a child remains in the back seat, as well as the child safety seat requirements. Unfortunately, the House Transportation Bill as drafted includes few safety measures and would actually repeal safety belt performance grants, the Older Driver Safety Program, and child safety and child booster seat incentive grants. So I hope this hearing today will highlight the importance of the provisions of the Senate bill, and the other party will reconsider their approach here in the House. Auto safety should be a bipartisan issue. I shouldn't say just. 4 years ago, I worked closely with Representative Peter King to enact the Cameron-Gulbranson Kids Transportation Safety Act. That bill mandated a rear visibility rule, and we are anxiously awaiting finalization of that this year, and of course it will save lives. The Senate bill, with its many safety initiatives, passed by an overwhelming vote, has been mentioned, 74-22, and there is no reason we can't move auto safety forward in a similar way here in the House. I hope we do it immediately, and I yield back to Mr. Waxman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. We're going to have 3 panels today. As always, each witness has prepared an opening statement. The full statement will be in the record. You will have 5 minutes for summarizing your remarks. Our first panel, of course, is our colleague, Congressman John Lewis, and we are delighted to have you here. You are recognized for 5 minutes, and as always, punch the button to turn on the mic. Watch the timer. When it turns yellow, you're going to have 1 minute for a wrap-up, and we are delighted that you're here, and you may begin.
Well, thank you very much, Chairwoman Blackburn, Ranking Member Butterfield, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. On March 2nd, 2007, an accident in my congressional district made headlines across the country. A charter bus carrying the Buffington University baseball team careened off a closed exit and crashed onto Highway I-75 in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. It was devastating. 7 of the 35 passengers lost their lives on that terrible day. A university, a community, parents, teachers, teammates, and friends mourned. News outlets across the country asked, why did this happen? How can we prevent this from occurring again? A few days later, my office received a phone call from Dr. Jerry Solomon, saying one of the leading surgeons who treated the players, he knew that the graded doctors, this is Greater Hospital, one of the best trauma centers in America. These graded doctors could have saved more life if only the team had not been thrown out of their seats. and ejected from the bus. Dr. Solomon explained his painful work trying to save lives and do the patchwork. He felt strongly that much of it could have been prevented if only they had been wearing seatbelts. He stated that countless lives could have been saved had Congress acted years ago. He was furious at our inaction. He knew what his job was and demanded that we do ours. As a nation, we learn time and time again that motor coach accidents are rare, but when they occur, the consequences are severe. The National Transportation Safety Board recommended time and time again that Congress enact stronger, comprehensive motor coach bus safety standards. Since that terrible dark day in downtown Atlanta, there have been 120 accidents across the country. 120. Some are small and are quick birds on the local news, but others, like the tragedy in Sherman, Texas, the Bronx in New York, East Brunswick, New Jersey, High Point, North Carolina, or most recent in Clinton, Montana, send a deadly reminder that Congress needs to act, and we need to act now. For me, buses are very important. They're personal. Madam Chair, I traveled for 6 years from rural Alabama through Montgomery, through Birmingham to Nashville, Tennessee, from 1957 to 63 on my way to school. I grew up taking motor coach buses, again in Alabama, in Georgia, in Tennessee, in Virginia, in the Carolinas. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sent me a bus ticket to meet him for the first time in 1958 when I was 18. And I later joined thousands of freedom riders to desegregate interstate commerce. I know all too well that buses are the lifeline of our nation. It is a major means of transportation for all Americans, sporting teams, students, tourists, in every corner of our country. It is so wrong to push for them. Is it so wrong to push for them to be safe? It is the right thing to do. It is the necessary thing to do. For 5 years, we have had a bipartisan effort on this issue. Senators on both sides of the aisle have tried repeatedly to push this bill forward. Every time an accident occurred in their home states, their citizens like mine demand action, and we must act. I commend the Senate and for their inclusion of the Motor Coach Enhanced Safety Act in the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. Recently, my good friend and colleague, Congressman Ted Pope from Texas, joined me in offering an amendment to H.R. 7 to ensure that the House bill include equal high motor coach standards. This is one of those issues where we just need to put partisan politics aside and get it done. The American people are demanding that we act. The motor coach industry had decades to make their fleet safe and safer, and time is up. Congress needs to act and act now, not tomorrow or next year, but now. I urge each of you to sit back and ask yourself why you can get on a bus and have access to wireless service and outlets, but not a seatbelt. It doesn't make sense. Your window is not crash-proof. The roof is not crush-resistant. Trust me. You do not want to be on the receiving end of a phone call from a doctor, a parent, a survivor, a child that lost that patient, a loved one, in a preventable motor coach accident. I hope and pray that any bill that this committee puts on the floor will send an unmistakable message that the United States House of Representatives, the body of the people, speaks in a clear voice for safety. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We appreciate your testimony. I have no questions that I am going to ask, but at this time I'm going to yield to Mr. Butterfield, who does have one question he would like to ask for the record.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Lewis, for your very powerful statement. I think it speaks volumes and clearly explains the issue that we have to deal with. But as you acknowledge, the Senate bill is somewhat different from the way you would like to see this handled. The Senate does not require a retrofitting of motor coaches, and your bill does. Would you be happy with the Senate version, or do you want to stay with the idea of requiring retrofitting?
Well, no, I would love to see what is in our bill prevail, but I'm prepared to accept a compromise. I want action.
All right. That's my question, straight to the point. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman for yielding back. Is there anyone further seeking recognition for questions? Mr. Upton, Mr. Harper, Mr. Lance? No. Okay. We thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Strickland? For our second panel, we have the Honorable David Strickland, Administrator of the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA, as we love to call it. Good morning. We are pleased that you are here. You are recognized for 5 minutes, and as always, punch that button to get the mic on so that we can hear you, and watch the timer. When it moves to yellow, you will have 1 minute left for wrap-up, and at this point, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Ranking Member Butterfield and members of the committee, it's always good to be back before Energy and Commerce. This is a fantastic opportunity for the men and women of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to have the opportunity to discuss the motor vehicle safety provisions in the Surface Transportation Reauthorization. I could definitely speak with some experience here in terms of the amount of effort it takes to get one of these bills done. I had the pleasure and honor to serve as a staffer on the Senate Commerce Committee during the work on Safety Lou. So I definitely appreciate the task before you and happy to be of assistance along with my staff at any time that you ask. As you know, last year, the nation continued a long-term downward trend in traffic-related fatalities. In 2010, there were 32,885 motor vehicle-related fatalities, a 24% reduction compared to 2005 and the lowest level since 1949. For all of us at the agency, this trend is encouraging, but almost 33,000 people losing their lives in motor vehicle crashes is a toll that is way too heavy. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is working across multiple fronts to save lives and reduce traffic-related injuries. We continue to promote responsible driver behavior to reduce alcohol-impaired driving and to encourage the use of seatbelts. We are also working vigorously to meet the new challenge of distracted driving. At the same time, we are exploring new emerging technologies that have the potential to prevent crashes from happening in the first place, which frankly is the moonshot for dealing with all of our fatalities on the roads. As I discuss more fully in my written testimony, the Senate has included a number of provisions that would permit the agency to ensure motor vehicle and equipment safety on a broader basis than we can today, including the authority to address safety hazards caused by some imported motor vehicle equipment, greater consumer protection against safety defects or non-compliance from manufacturers who file for bankruptcy, and increases in the total amount of civil penalties that NHTSA can seek for safety-related violations. To further strengthen our safety mission, we seek additional authority in several areas, including the authority to require action by used car dealers or rental car companies with regard to recalled vehicles, clarification of authority over safety-related aspects of distracting portable electronic devices in vehicles, and the direct appellate review of recall orders to ensure that manufacturers may challenge orders while avoiding lengthy district court trials during which there is no recall in effect to protect consumers. We at the agency believe that these straightforward clarifications of authority would enable us to address timely safety concerns on our roadways. For example, the authority to notify consumers of recall issues before they purchase a used vehicle or rent a car could easily protect consumers and provide real-world safety benefits. Here is a second example. The agency recently proposed visual manual driver distraction guidelines. These guidelines are designed for vehicle manufacturers to consider as they introduce electronic devices into these vehicles. However, the agency needs clarification of its authority concerning the safety aspects of external devices that can also distract drivers inside the vehicle. Here again, clarification of the agency's authority to do so is an important element in furthering the safety of those devices. Finally, the Senate bill includes numerous rulemaking provisions with some very short deadlines. I appreciate the inclusion of a provision that would allow an extension of a time frame when necessary with an explanation to the committees of jurisdiction. This will permit the agency to continue to prioritize its regulatory work based on available resources and the judgment of the likely safety benefits and costs. Thank you again, Madam Chairman, for this opportunity to testify before the committee today. I'm happy to answer any questions that all of you may have.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time, and I tell you what, record pace getting through that opening statement, and we will try to reciprocate with our questions. I will yield myself 5 minutes to begin the questioning with you. I want to start, something was mentioned in opening statements about the safety belt grants. I want to just seek some clarification. Are you not looking to repeal those grants and then reprogram that money for other uses?
That's correct. We'll happy to have the question more fully for the record, but right now it's the Section 406 grants under Safety Lieu, which is a primary belt grant which gives a very significant payment for states that have not passed the primary belt law for the first time, and it pulls that incentive. Therefore, the reason we're asking to reprogram these particular funds is that, frankly, the states that we feel that could be pulled in by this incentive have taken action. And at this point right now, we are having fairly significant resources that are not being expended, and we feel that we could repurpose these particular funds in a way that can further increase belt use, but not tying up the resources for some states that may not decide to go in that direction of primary belts.
Okay, and that's action you already have in process?
Yeah, actually,
okay.
No, we made technical assistance to the Senate in regards to this issue, and that's what they did.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I want to ask you about Cass Sunstein's comments. Describing the guidance that is being given to federal agencies on the cumulative effects of regulations on industries. And how is NHTSA planning on complying with that new guidance?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chairman. This is something that, frankly, internally that we have always done in coordination with all of our rules. We always have to take into consideration the cumulative effect of the work that we're doing. It is our goal to make sure that the rules that we promulgate maximize safety benefits while taking into account the possible costs. It does not serve to anyone's advantage to have redundant or unnecessary rules that do not apply or improve the prism of safety. So frankly, I think Administrator Sunstein's guidance is effectively what the agencies are already working under. That was a clear clarification of the particular guidance and intent, but in terms of our rulemaking operation, we already sort of take those elements into.
So you have an active cost-benefit analysis.
Absolutely.
That is in place. Would that apply to the last fall's CAFE proposal and the pending review visibility rule, the visual manual guidelines for automakers, potential rulemakings on advanced vehicle communications such as vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure?
For CAFE, Madam Chairman, yes, it applies.
Okay.
For rear visibility, it applies. In regards to the visual manual guidelines, they are guidelines, they are not a rule, so therefore we did not have to take costs into effect.
Okay. All right. And what about the vehicle communications?
That will be, right now we're making an agency decision as to the vehicle-to-vehicle systems. We're making an agency decision by the end of this year, which may then enter into a rulemaking phase. When it does, prospectively, if the agency decides to move forward with a rule in regards to vehicle-to-vehicle communications, then of course the cost-benefit analysis guidance would then fall into play in terms of our issuance of that rule.
Okay. We've got a fragile recovery in the auto industry, if you will. And so as you look at rules and guidelines and mandates and requirements on the car makers, What are you doing there to make certain that you don't overreach and harm a recovery? That everything you're doing is you're going to look at that cost-benefit analysis?
Madam Chairman, as you already referred, the cost-benefit analysis definitely asks us to weigh the cost and the benefits of our rules, thinking about numbers and factors. I mean, frankly, in some situations, depending on the rules, thousands of variables of factors in terms of cost and benefit, and including how it may impact potential consumers and the industry itself. So in terms of our evaluations, that has been our North Star in terms of our rulemaking effort. So in regards to CAFE, in regards to rear visibility, we've always taken very hard looks at the most two recent examples of how we look at costs and benefits and how they may impact the fleet. And so absolutely, we take that into account very strongly every time we go into a rulemaking process.
You noted in your testimony that you all are already working on many of the items that are in the Senate bill.
That is correct.
And of those mandates that are there, the standards that they're looking to mandate, how many are you already working on?
Well, there's several. We'll get back to you on the record specifically for the complete
That would be
number.
helpful.
But we have, we could also definitely refer to our research and rulemaking priority plan, which we have posted on NHTSA.gov, which goes through the time frames and the process of where we are in all of our work. But there is a significant amount of work in motor coach and other places where we have undertaken work, and we're actually close to completion on some of those elements.
Thank you. My time has expired. I recognize Mr. Butterfield.
Thank you. In 2009, NHTSA issued a motor coach safety action plan. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Building off of NTSB recommendations, the plan set rulemaking priorities for crash avoidance, seat belts, fire safety, emergency egress, and ejection mitigation. A timeline for addressing these priorities was outlined in the agency's 2011-2013 Rulemaking and Research Priority Plan. In the past, NHTSA has often not met its rulemaking timelines. That is why Congress has felt the need to step in and impose deadlines. Regardless of whether the Senate bill becomes law, how do you intend to stick to your deadlines?
Ranking member, absolutely. I will have to say that all of these safety issues are so important, and the timeliness of them and the promulgation of these issues is the highest priority of the Secretary and myself. We always have to recognize that this work has to be based on sound science, sound engineering principles, and frankly, there is a notion of sometimes the chaos theory and the unknown in terms of the work, in terms of how we promulgate these rules. However, we have very close to completion on a number of these rules, such as the mandatory seatbelt rule for motor coaches. We're on the edge of working on and possibly promulgating a proposal for electronic stability control in heavy-duty vehicles, for example, for roof crush structures and vehicle stringency for motor coaches. We are very close to working on that as well. So I appreciate the fact that we are well overdue. It is the Secretary's commitment and my commitment that we hold to our deadlines and that we issue these rules in a timely manner.
A notice of proposed rulemaking on the seatbelt standard was released in August of 2010, and the comment period closed about 18 months ago. What is the status of this rulemaking?
Right now, it is over. It is over at the Office of Management and Budget. We hope that this rule will be issued fairly soon in 2012.
Let me ask you about school buses. I just learned recently that school buses don't fit within the definition of motor coach. Is that correct?
That's in terms, and that's. I guess the question is, motor coach as an over-the-road bus or school bus. There are definitional differences.
And is there any type of conversation ongoing about whether or not these safety features should be included on school buses? And the reason I ask that, and it's been so long ago, and I don't expect anyone to remember it, but in my congressional district, I guess 25 or 30 years ago, there was an awful school bus accident in which all of the children on the bus were actually killed. And the conversation back then and remains in that small community, about seatbelts on school buses.
Well, school buses, sir, we have actually taken action on in terms of we have permitted the states may go forward and they may individually decide to mandate belts on buses within their particular states or jurisdictions. There is not a national rule mandating belts on school buses, or it's not part of the current rulemaking undertaking for motor coaches. The reason is this: the safest form of transportation for children is a school bus, period. There's probably a handful of deaths a year, maybe I think 7 or 8 fatalities per year because of school bus crashes, and most of those are for children that are struck outside of the bus. In terms of the actual bus crashes, I think the average would be 1 to 2 children per year, versus the hundreds of thousands of miles that are traveled and the thousands and thousands of children that are carried by school buses. Adding the belts on the buses may actually decrease the number of buses available for children to ride, which would actually increase the number of fatalities of children because they'll be forced to taking passenger cars. There is the structure of compartmentalization in buses, protects children, and frankly, the costs and the benefits of having the belts on buses, the agency feels that is not the appropriate measure at this time. We feel that adding belts on buses decrease the number of buses and thereby would increase the risk of children driving in passenger cars.
All right, in the interest of time, I think I'm going to yield back. I had one more, but I'm going to yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Butterfield. Would you like to submit that one for the record, just to get a response in writing?
Sure.
Okay. We will do so accordingly. At this time, I recognize Mr. Harper for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Strickland, thank you for being here and taking this time. I'm sure you were looking at fun things to do, and this was at the top of your list, but we appreciate your time. You know, one of the big safety concerns seems to be texting while driving. That is the complaint I hear more than anything else back home, and it is something that we certainly tell our friends and staff don't do that.
We appreciate that.
It's certainly something coming in from the airport Monday. We almost observed a major wreck on interstate coming in from Reagan National, where there was a work truck stop, and it was clear they were not paying attention, and it was within a foot or two of plowing into the back of a stopped work truck. So, you know, it is a great concern every day for us on how we're going to address those issues. One of the questions, I know there's some talk about maybe blocking cell phone usage of drivers. Is that something that you're looking at, any aspect of that, or just texting?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Harper. The Secretary's leadership over the past 3 years on distraction has really sort of given, frankly, the entire country leadership and guidance on this emerging threat. From his work on the 2 distraction summits, and frankly his direction to all the modal administrations, including mine, on things that we could do to address distraction risks in our particular modes of vehicles. Clearly, the usage of devices in motor vehicles poses a very significant threat. We lost over 3,000 people in 2010 to distraction-related crashes. In terms of your question regarding technologies that may be used to intervene, we are looking at several possible technology pipelines as possibilities for further research. But right now, we're really focused on our distraction plan, which the first element is the visual manual guidelines that are right now in the proposal and comment period, and that closes on April 24th. And then our next work will begin then on pneumatic devices and then voice commands or cognitive impact of using these devices.
Is there any plan, or do you support, I know some localities have cell phone bans, you know, in driving. Is that something that you're looking at technology-wise to restrict driver usage of cell phones?
At this point right now, our review of the technologies, we don't see a viable pathway technologically for cell phone blocking, because the thing called spillover, you can basically, you have, say, a jamming signal in a vehicle. It doesn't stay in one vehicle. It spreads to other vehicles. There's a similar issue. It's corollary, but not necessarily directly connected, where I know in the penal system that they're looking at possibly having cell phone jammers to keep prisoners from using cell phones. They have the very same issues. It spills out and over well outside of the borders of the jail and impacts actual consumers. So in terms of that particular issue, we don't see particular promise in that technology, but we are not sort of on a pathway of analysis of trying to figure out a technological way to stop cell phone usage in a car. We're not doing that type of work.
Of course, distracted driving has been an issue since the first AM radio got put in the first car.
Yes, sir.
And so I know that we certainly don't want to interfere with anyone's ability to enjoy themselves while they're driving, but the texting is certainly something that we're interested in working on to work with you on that particular issue.
Well, the one other thing I'd like to definitely underscore, Mr. Harper, I think you made a very good point. you know, distraction is more than just a phone. Distraction is more than just an Android device or whatever the case may be. There is an element of personal responsibility. It has to be involved with every driver. So as much as we're working on making sure the vehicle doesn't create more risk, it's also important to underscore that it makes sure that people recognize that your only job behind the wheel is to drive. So thank you very much for noting that, sir.
Okay, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman for yielding back. At this time, Ms. Schakowsky, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I wanted to tell you, Mr. Strickland, that I got a very much appreciated call from the Secretary about the rulemaking on the rear visibility in vehicles, that the standard that I hope will come out. And while I'm disappointed that it didn't come out in February as it was originally scheduled, he explained his absolute commitment to getting it done. So just for the record, I wanted to thank you, and I also wanted you to comment on your commitment to issuing a strong rule and whether it is at all possible to move up that timeline.
Ms. Schakowsky, I absolutely give the very same commitment the Secretary gave to you. As I've had the honor to work with you on this particular issue as a staffer, and I remember we're beginning work on this issue in 2003. I am very proud of a lot of the work that I was able to share and assist members on over the years, but I will say the Cameron-Branson Act is probably one of the highlights in terms of what I think is such a special rule, because it is about children's safety. So for that, we at the agency want to make sure that we get this rule right, and we want to make very special care to do that. But absolutely, we are laser focused on working through those issues and getting this and getting the rule promulgated as the Secretary issued the deadline.
Thank you very much. About 2 children get killed every month, so the sooner the better, right? The other thing that you alluded to in your testimony, you briefly mentioned, under current law, there's a loophole that allows rental car companies to lease out vehicles that are under safety recall without making the repairs. I frankly was pretty startled to find that out. And in 2004, 2 sisters, Rachel and Jacqueline Hauk, were killed in a Chrysler PT Cruiser that was under recall for steering problems, yet rented out by Enterprise. The steering column malfunctioned, the car caught fire, and they veered into the path of an ongoing tractor trailer. Can't understand why there's any excuse for rental companies to loan out cars to individuals without making the necessary repairs, which manufacturers usually provide for free. So you touched on this issue and wanted to know what authority NHTSA has to prevent these avoidable accidents.
Ms. Schakowsky, the department provided technical assistance to the Senate in regards to this issue. You are absolutely right. Right now, rental car companies and used car companies have no obligation under law to fix a repair that has been issued under the Safety Act, which means you have unwitting and unsuspecting consumers that may be getting in vehicles that are not repaired and putting themselves at risk. These companies are in the stream of commerce, and I don't think that any consumer whatsoever should have an expectation or worry that the next car they rent may not be properly repaired and put their lives at risk. So we very much support the proposition of giving its authority under the Motor Vehicle Safety Act to then cross-apply our enforcement authority over rental car companies and used car dealers so that we can make sure that these cars get repaired.
Thank you very much, and once again, thank you for all the work that you have done on the rear visibility rule, and I hope that we'll see it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schakowsky.
Thank the gentlelady for yielding back, and at this time I recognize Mr. Guthrie for 5 minutes.
Hey, thank you for coming here today. Appreciate having you.
Thank you, sir.
Looking at the Senate Highway Bill, it has a lot of new requirements that you're going to have to put forth. Some like the event device recorder, the black box, and the push button ignition standards. And it asks you to move forward on rulemaking in some areas that your group's still studying. So anyway, it puts a lot of mandates for you to do over the next course of the bill. And I guess my question is do you feel like that's going to overwhelm what you do? I know you're probably not overstaffed. And are you going to have to pull people from one project? You are over? You say you are?
Oh no, quite the not overstaffing. Quite the contrary.
Oh, I know you're not.
We have a very active and vigorous fighting force of 600.
Exactly, that's what I figured. So all these new mandates coming out, does it concern you in your ability to finish projects your own? You're going to have to move people from one project to another?
Mr. Guthrie, we have a research and rulemaking priority plan which is based on data and risk. We work very hard to make sure that we allocate our resources in a way that we save the most lives in terms of the work that we do. Well, we recognize that in terms of our own analysis, there is clearly other issues that the Congress may ask us to take up that we're more than willing and happy to do, but it has to be done in the context of recognizing that these have to be done within the context of the other rules that we're working on, which really do have a broad impact to save lives.
So
Every additional rule does add more burden, and we definitely ask for, I guess, the ability to be able to adjust deadlines, with the Secretary notifying the committees of jurisdiction of the reasons why we had to make those particular moves. But we will say that the deadlines in the Senate bill are incredibly aggressive, and frankly, I don't think that as they're currently written, we would not be able to make those deadlines just by the very nature of regular rulemaking. We couldn't make those deadlines.
Well, that's good to know, because I know your rulemaking process you assign by risk, as you just said, and so if the number one thing you're working on is the number one thing that's going to save lives, and as you move down, if all of a sudden you get these mandates from the outside, and of course it's within the purview of Congress to do so, but we need to understand that as we put new mandates on you, that if they were in your queue already, at the high part of your queue, they would be high risk, because that's what you're looking at. So we're going to ask you to pull people off other projects, it sounds like, if we pass the deadlines that the Senate put into place.
We would ask to be able to work with the committees of jurisdiction on being able to establish timeframes to accomplish all the safety goals that they're asking. The things that are highlighted in the Senate bill are important. They are risks, but I want to make sure that we can sort of align our resources and our workload to be, if we could best address the risk that affects most people.
And one other question, I know there's a 2-year ban for somebody that works for your commission, safety, I guess, agency, to go work in the private industry when they're after. And I know there are a lot of people that are automotive engineers that have specific data skills or so forth, and you may want to hire them from a private industry, because I've been through proving grounds, test grounds, and so they're highly skilled people, highly educated people who do this for private industry, trying to make sure they have safety and security, because we know our automotive suppliers want to put out safe vehicles. But if you needed somebody with those kind of ability, and they knew that if they came work for you for some number of years or a brief period of time and couldn't go back, is that a problem in recruiting, I guess, is my question, and the 2-year ban, you think, is going to be an issue for you?
Mr. Guthrie, the Obama administration holds our ethics obligations at the highest level in order. We believe that our guiding light should be making sure that we serve the American people in an honest and forthright way. However, we also believe that the ethics rules should be thought about and considered and applied in a federally consistent manner. I think one of the impacts that you highlighted is that when you single out a particular agency, whether it's ours, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or others, you have unintended consequences. And we're more than happy to have a dialogue with the committee to discuss ways that we can work on.
Because this doesn't ban them, I'm about out of time. This doesn't ban them from lobbying. This bans them from going back and working in a private industry,
That's
right?
correct.
In the field. So if you have highly technical vehicle engineers, and our automotive people have them, they have them working for them because they are in the business of putting out a safe product. And therefore, these people would really be banned for you to hire, because they would hurt their careers. And they're not talking about going back and trying to influence policy. They're going back and back and forth to making sure we have safe vehicles on the road. I'm familiar with the industry, so I think that that's going to limit you in hiring those kind of people.
Well, Mr. Guthrie, we are always mindful of trying to make sure we are blessed with some of the best automotive talent in the world that work for our agency. We are always mindful of the ability to be able to recruit and compete, good talent going forward, and anything that we could do to make sure that we have clearly the highest ethical standards that are federally consistent, and the ability to be able to actively compete not only with private industry to bring in the best talent, but frankly other agencies across government to bring in the best talent. It's always something that we would be happy to discuss with the committee and hopefully find a way forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman for yielding back. And I do not think we're going to do a second round. I just have 2 additional questions that I wanted to highlight with you and get your input in the Senate bill. Why didn't that include a reauthorization for your vehicle safety programs. I think it did your highway programs, but not your vehicle.
Point of order, Madam Chairman. Are we going to do a second round or not do a second round?
If you would like to do a second round,
Well,
we
it
can do
appears
a
that you are
second round.
engaged in a second round, which is contrary to what I thought the agreement was.
We can do a second round if everyone would like to.
Well,
I
I'm just
have
trying to
two
get the
further
third.
questions.
I'm trying to get the third panel on cue here.
Yes, sir,
But
we are too.
Yes. Well, I thought we had an agreement. Apparently, we don't. Consider this a second round.
We will do so. So what we would like to hear is why didn't the Senate bill include a reauthorization for those vehicle safety programs?
Ms. Blackburn, I can't speak to the decision that the Senate made in terms of why they constructed the bill that they did. We provided technical assistance, and they made a decision not to include that particular provision.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any input on that decision?
We were asked, the Senate Commerce Committee and the other committees of jurisdiction of the Senate asks the agency for technical assistance. We provide direct technical assistance,
Okay.
but we're not involved in any policy decision.
That's great. And then does electronic stability control present different challenges for different types of vehicles, or is it simply a matter of installing the same technology that has already been developed for smaller vehicles?
It's very different. There's so many different variables in establishing electronic stability control in heavy-duty vehicles. I presume that's what you're asking.
Yes.
And there is yaw stability, there's roll stability, there's a number of other elements, there's different testing protocols. It is a wildly different animal, which will take time for us to make sure that we get it right.
Okay, so you're just seeking further time.
Well, we are currently working on the proposal, but in terms of your question, which is, are light vehicles, electronic stability control, cross-applicable to heavy duty? The answer is no, they're not. We have to undertake new work to do so.
Okay. With that, that is the extent of the questions that we were seeking. Mr. Butterfield, I recognize you for a second round.
All right. Thank you. Administrator, in previous testimony to this committee, you have expressed concern that the maximum civil penalty the agency can seek from a manufacturer is set in the statute at only $15 million per case, which adjusted for inflation comes to a little over $7 million in today's dollars. In 2010, NHTSA assessed the maximum allowable penalties at the time against Toyota, 16.4 in one case, 16 million in another, for a total of $32 million. NHTSA noted in a letter to the company that without this cap, Toyota could have been assessed penalties for $13.8 billion. If Senate 1813 were to become law, there would be the potential for increased civil penalties up to $250 million per case. Question: how would increasing the civil penalties cap strengthen the agency's ability to enforce safety rules? How would it affect your interactions with the auto companies?
Mr. Butterfield, we have the obligation and the duty to protect American safety regarding traffic crashes, and thereby we regulate some of the largest industries on planet Earth. And frankly, a maximum penalty of over $17 million is frankly a pittance to most of these, full-line vehicle manufacturers. For us to be able to have a higher deterrent value, being able to not have to go into an enforcement posture in the first place and therefore use resources and time for investigating, we feel that a more significant penalty would frankly create a greater incentive for manufacturers to comply with the rules without us having to expend more resources to investigate and enforce. We feel that it is high time that these particular penalties are reflective of the size of the industry, and therefore we gave technical assistance to the Senate, and we are happy that the Senate did include an increase in the provision, an increase in the civil penalty provision.
Thank you. I yield back.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to correct one thing for the record. My apologies. In your question, you asked of me about motor coach belt safety. I apologize that actually the final rulemaking is within the Department of Transportation. Has not gone over to OMB yet, but we have finished our particular work is right now in review within the department.
I thank you for the correction. We will note it in the record.
Thank you.
At this time, I recognize Ms. Schakowsky passes. Mr. Strickland, we thank you. You're always generous with your time, and we thank you for coming before us today. And with there being no further questions from the panel, we would dismiss you and have a very brief recess while we set our third panel for the day. And again, we thank you for your generosity of time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We look forward to working with the committee.
Hopefully I won't have to dig into it, but just in case.
I don't mind.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
No, I'm not.
Our third panel and our witnesses for the third panel. We are moving right along this morning. So Mr. Butterfield was just saying, well, if we had 3 minutes for each opening statement, we could do this in 18 minutes, but we will not rush you. We will not rush you, I assure you. Our witnesses in the order that they will give us their testimony this morning. Mitch Bainwall, who is the President and CEO of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers. Next is Michael Stanton. He's the President and CEO of Global Automakers. Our third witness, Victor Para, President and CEO of United Motor Coach Association. Our fourth witness, Peter Pantusco, President and CEO of the American Bus Association. Our fifth witness is the Honorable Joan Claybrook, former NHTSA Administrator and Consumer Co-Chair of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Our final witness is Amy Gadia, Senior Policy Counsel at Consumers Union, Political and Action from Consumer Reports. We are delighted that each of you are here. We thank you for your time and for the preparation in your testimony. You are each going to be recognized for 5 minutes. I would remind you all, move the microphone toward you, touch the button to turn it on. When you see the light turn yellow on the timer, you have 1 minute to wrap up. Mr. Bainwall, you may begin.
Chairman Blackburn, Mr. Butterfield, on behalf of 12 leading car companies, thank you for this opportunity to testify today. I'm Mitch Bainwall, President of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers. I represent 3 U.S.-based companies, as well as 9 iconic European and Japanese brands. Our companies sell 3 of 4 cars purchased in the U.S. I'm pleased to say that our industry is leading America out of recession. After a nearly catastrophic 2008 and 2009, car sales were up about 10% each of the last 2 years, with forecasts strong for 2012 as well. Domestic and foreign-based companies are adding shifts, plants, and jobs in the United States. Exports are rising again. BMWs from South Carolina, VWs from Tennessee, Toyotas from Kentucky, Mercedes from Alabama, and Detroit 3 products moving literally all over the globe. All told, 8 million Americans owe their employment to this sector, at least 10,000 employees in each of 47 states. So it's an honor to represent manufacturers who view safety in a very serious way and employ thousands of engineers who work every day to make the vehicles safer. And the results are striking. I think we're going to have a slide brought up. Perhaps not. There we go. Okay, as you can see from this slide, you know, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a trend line tells a pretty compelling story. What you have from on the yellow line is the vehicles miles traveled, moving from roughly 500 billion miles to 3 trillion miles from 1950 to 2010. Then you have a line going in the inverse direction, and that's the fatality rate. So it's really a stunning success story. I don't mean to say that the job is done, but I think this slide as a predicate for today's hearing really does tell a very compelling story. And I'd say that the prognosis for future gains is outstanding. We're at the dawn of a new golden age in safety developments. Driver assist technologies that dramatically enhance crash avoidance are already in dealerships today. Technologies like blind spot alerts, lane departure warnings, autonomous braking, adaptive cruise control, and more. 2 weeks ago, I was in Sweden where I test drove a Volvo with city safety, and that's Volvo's technology that assists drivers with automatic braking in certain cases. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety here took a snapshot of accidents with the Volvo XC60 equipped with this technology and found a 27% reduction in front-end collisions relative to similar vehicles. A 27% reduction. The implications for the safety of drivers and passengers, for insurance rates, for traffic flow, and for fuel economy is nothing short of profound. And that's just one technology. So the goal, as a matter of policy, must be to maximize the rate of innovation. Our review of the Senate reauthorization hinges on that concept. Do the provisions enhance the ability of automakers to invent and implement new technologies or not? Do the provisions help or hinder consumers to access these new technologies? With innovation in mind, we have three particular concerns with the Senate bill. First, Section 304 seeks to reverse existing NHTSA policy and recent court decisions regarding early warning reporting data. While transparency generally is a good idea, we agree with NHTSA and the courts that existing regulations strike the right balance between publicly available data and confidential business information. The early warning system was specifically designed so that NHTSA would benefit from the widest possible universe of information, but would also be responsible for screening the data to avoid precipitating premature and potentially misplaced panic among drivers, and that would stimulate costly and baseless litigation and inhibit innovation. Second, relating to Section 406, the Alliance supports equipping new vehicles with event data recorders, EDRs, with sufficient lead time to implement this technology for those few manufacturers who have not yet done so. Yet 406 both requires NHTSA to conduct a study on the privacy implications from expanding the scope of the EDRs and mandates a second rulemaking in a short time frame, regardless of the outcome of that study. Triggering a rulemaking without first concluding the study puts the cart before the horse. Congress and the public should have a clear understanding of the privacy implications as well as the cost consumers will absorb before the agency writes a new rule. And third, the Senate bill targets the auto industry in a baseless, counterproductive, and punitive fashion. It sends a signal to auto employees throughout this country that policymakers are hostile to the sector by imposing civil penalties 15 times the magnitude of penalties faced in other manufacturers, also large businesses of consumer products. The rationale for the super penalty is flawed. Its imposition would damage our ability to compete and provide jobs, and it would divert resources that would be better spent in innovation. Today, the average car on the road is about 11 years old. That average car doesn't have electronic stability control. It doesn't have sophisticated airbags. It doesn't have features like voice control to keep eyes on the road and hands on the wheel. It doesn't have the new driver assist technologies that I spoke about. The average car probably gets mileage 20% worse than today's cars that are comparable. And it doesn't have current advanced environmental controls. The illustration makes a very simple point. The best thing we can do for consumers is not just facilitate innovation, but facilitate replacing old cars with new cars. For safety, for the environment, for the health of the economy, we should make cars as as affordable as possible. That, of course, means that we have to be careful not to price cars out of reach with noble intent, but counterproductive regulatory access. Many thanks for this chance to participate.
Thank the gentleman for yielding back. Mr. Stanton, you're recognized.
Yes, and in the spirit of Mr. Butterfield's suggestion, I will be brief. I do want to note that the provisions that are in the House and the Senate bill that extend incentive grant funding for programs to improve safety belt use and implement alcohol and impaired driving countermeasures are extremely important. We believe these programs should be funded. Generally, where the Senate has prescribed something, but NHTSA is already proceeding with rulemaking, we would support the continuation of the NHTSA rulemaking, and this includes things such as brake pedal override, push-button ignition systems, mandatory installation of EDRs, and pedal placement, which they're looking at. We think that's appropriately a research project and not subject for rulemaking at this time. There are a couple of provisions in the Senate bill, though, that are problematic. The bill proposes increases in noncompliance penalties reaching levels that are disproportionately higher than those under other current regulatory laws. Vehicle manufacturers take their safety compliance obligations extremely seriously, and the substantial increase in the penalty amount seems to be unnecessarily and unfairly punitive. The bill would also create a presumption in favor of public disclosure of manufacturer-submitted information relating to potential defects. This information is manufacturing quality data which has substantial competitive value. This matter has been previously and carefully considered by the agency and the courts, and we see no need to revise the balance that has been struck. The Senate bill would also add an additional civil penalty to existing criminal penalties for submitting false information and reports to NHTSA. Layering additional civil fines on top potential criminal penalties for making false statements to the government is unnecessary and unlikely to enhance motor vehicle safety. And also, the section on event data recorders is overly prescriptive. NHTSA currently has several rulemaking proceedings underway or planned to address these matters. It would be more appropriate to allow NHTSA to complete its investigations and issue rules based upon a full and comprehensive analysis of these complex matters. And finally, we believe it would be premature for Congress to mandate changes to the NHTSA recall process. NHTSA is conducting a comprehensive review of the recall process based on the Government Accountability's June 15, 2011 report. Congress should refrain from imposing any new mandates on the recall process without benefit of this review. Thank you, ma'am.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Pantuso, you're recognized.
Madam Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. ABA has been working to make bus travel safer for many years. We worked with the late Congressman Paul Gilmore, and in recent years with Congressman Bill Schuster on legislation that has really formed the basis for H.R. 7's safety provisions. ABA represents 4,000 members. 800 of those are bus companies representing 60% of all the private motor coaches on the road today. Our members provide a variety of transportation services, including schedule service, charter and tour, and commuter service, and the industry provides more than 270 million passenger trips annually. It's clear that the bus industry is the safest form of surface transportation. However, accidents do happen, and we know that one fatality is one too many. ABA has reaffirmed our support for full implementation of DOT's Motor Coach Safety Action Plan. We provide members safety ratings on our website to assist consumers in finding safe bus companies, and we regularly review their records and ask unsafe companies to leave the association. ABA and its members believe there should be seat belts on new motor coaches. Our public comments submitted to NHTSA on this regulation are very clear. We agree with proponents of S 1813 that advanced window glazing, roof crush strength, emergency egress, fire detection and suppression, and stability control must be studied. If appropriate rulemakings are required, they must be initiated if they find problems in their research. But however, the time limits in the Senate bill are just too tight. NHTSA's recent multi-year experience in developing a seatbelt standard serves as a prime example of why adequate time is needed to structure a science-based approach which includes proper research and testing to save lives. And I want to stress this point. Our goal is to save lives and ensure the viability of our industry, not to promulgate one-size-fits-all rules. Automobiles and airplanes both have seat belts, but both are very different types of belts, seats, and restraint systems. ABA is concerned that S 1813's rush to get new rules. ABA also believes that NHTSA's multiple motor coach rulemakings should be done in concert with one another. What we don't want to see is a rulemaking's conclusion that negates a prior rulemaking's safety benefits. For example, if testing determines that to enhance vehicle performance in a rollover, windows should be strengthened or bonded to the coach as they are in Europe, That decision could impact adequate egress, since in the U.S., windows are part of the exit systems. But if windows, and it's already been finalized, the agency would need to restart that rulemaking process. The Senate bill also allows NHTSA to order retrofits of motor coaches that could force a complete re-engineering of the vehicle and force many small businesses out of business. Operators can comply with requirements of attaching readily available equipment, but operators are very small business people. And much like you or I, they can no more be expected to remanufacture a coach than we could re-engineer the vehicle that we purchase. We feel that early adoption of new technology is also clear, and that tax credits, grants, and loans to small operators are key. Without this support, the operators will have to bear the brunt of as much as $70,000 in additional capital costs and unfunded mandates. ABA is concerned that the Senate bill does not have any provision for operators' liability protection in those cases where the bus operator is compliant with current federal mandates. Please know that our differences with some of the provisions of S 1813 does not diminish our desire for a strong and robust bus safety provisions. In conclusion, Madam Chairman, I suggest that there must be also an increase in safety enforcement of existing regulations. Inconsistent enforcement has enabled illegal carriers to operate freely in too many markets. FMCSA must be given the authority to adequately close companies and to impound their buses if need be. Data shows that more than half of the motor coach fatalities that have taken place over the past decade were caused either by known unsafe carriers or illegal carriers, and these fatalities should have never occurred. We applaud FMCSA for its current enforcement actions, including the safety sweeps by a combined federal, state, and local task force, and we know that working together with this committee and other committees that we can make the safest form of surface transportation even safer. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Para.
Thank you, Chairman Blackburn, Ranking Member Butterfield, members of the committee. I appreciate you calling this hearing today and the opportunity to appear before this committee and represent the bus and motor coach industry. This committee has a long and distinguished record of promoting vehicle safety and lies at the center of this nation's discourse on best practices to achieve safe and efficient travel. On behalf of the United Motor Coach Association, it is my goal to provide the committee our perspective on the bus and motor coach safety provisions included in the American Energy and Infrastructure Jobs Act, H.R. 7, as reported by the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and those of S. 1813, the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, as passed by the Senate last week. Founded in 1971, the United Motor Coach Association is the nation's largest association of bus and motor coach companies and industry suppliers, with over 1,200 members located across North America. Membership represents the full spectrum of bus and motor coach operations, from small family charter and tour to nationwide scheduled and commuter service operations. The United States Small Business Administration estimates that over 90% of the privately owned bus and motor coach companies meet the definition of a small business. Motor coaches have one of the strongest safety records amongst all modes of transportation, with an average of only 20 fatalities a year. While even one fatality is one fatality too many, the motor coach industry operates in an environment that yields over 32,000 fatalities annually, representing less than 1/10 of 1% of those fatalities. UMA believes the best way to ensure improved safety is to enforce existing federal motor carrier safety regulations and support safety initiatives that are backed by science, research, and testing. With a life expectancy of well over 20 years, a modern motor coach represents a financial investment of $500,000 to $600,000. Consequently, our industry demands vehicles that offer the best-known design and construction that protects their passengers operationally from unforeseen accidents. UMA steadfastly welcomes changes in motor coach occupant protection. However, those changes must be founded by science and testing by appropriate federal agencies. Any mode of transportation that provides 720 million passenger trips annually demands the best science and regulations our federal agencies can produce. We believe H.R. 7 provides the most rational and reasonable approach to enhance bus and motor coach safety. Most of its provisions were largely based on a bill authored by Congressman Bill Schuster, H.R. 1390, which we strongly support because it recognizes the complexities of motor coach engineering and operations, mandating that science must drive policy and not the reverse. H.R. 7 incorporates the longstanding recommendations of the National Transportation Safety Board and is consistent with the Secretary of Transportation's Motor Coach Safety Action Plan. Indeed, NHTSA is well on its way with crash tests that have resulted in proposed rulemaking requiring 3-point seatbelts for every passenger. UMA supports this proposed rulemaking. Furthermore, our industry manufacturers have been proactive in installing seatbelts. In fact, in a study that we did with our motor coach manufacturers, we learned that about 100%, in fact 100% of the motor coaches put in service in the last year included seatbelts. In contrast, UMA strongly opposes the bus and motor coach safety provisions included in S 1813. We believe these safety provisions are an example of extreme government overreach and will not lead to increased motor coach safety. Many of its mandates are overlapping, unnecessary, and are currently already under research and testing by the federal agencies. Moreover, many of the mandates are simply unworkable within the time frames allotted. The motor coach tour and travel industry is an important economic engine in our country. It contributes nearly $112 billion in total economic activity in the United States. At a time when the motor coach industry is struggling to recover in this economy, this is not a time to impose unnecessary and excessive mandates on industry with an outstanding safety record. In conclusion, UMA believes that the contrast between the bus and motor coach safety provisions in the House bill and the Senate bill could not be more striking, and we appreciate this committee's focus on them. UMA stands ready to contribute to ongoing efforts to enhance safety of bus and motor coach operations. Thank you, Chairman Blackburn.
Thank you, and Ms. Claybrook, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Joan Claybrook. I am here representing Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, a coalition of consumer health, safety, and insurance companies. For the past 20 years, passage of a surface transportation bill under the leadership of both Republicans and Democrats has resulted in the adoption of some of the most significant advances in highway and auto safety that have literally saved thousands of lives, prevented millions of injuries, saved billions of dollars in healthcare and societal costs, and this year's bill should be no different. For these reasons, we want to move forward with this unfinished agenda that we have spelled out in our full statement. The Senate passed Transportation Bill S-1813, or MAP 21 as it's called, adopted with strong bipartisan support, includes many important vehicle safety protections for families, whether they're traveling by car or by inner-city motor coach. The MAP bill, which we support, requires NHTSA to issue new safety standards to ensure complex electronic systems that control the vehicle meet minimum quality and safety concerns, as they must today in aircraft. Other provisions would require vehicle brake systems that can always overrun accelerator control and foot pedals for the brake and accelerator that are not located too closely together. Additionally, the bill would ensure consumers have better access to agency information about safety-related data, recalls, and defects. Other provisions address whistleblower protection, conflicts of interest by former NHTSA employees, and corporate accountability for document submissions to ensure that government safety investigations proceed without impediment. It also directs agency actions to better protect children inside impact crashes, improve child restraint anchoring systems, increase seatbelt usage with rear seatbelt reminders, and address the risk of horrific death among young children inadvertently left behind in hot vehicles. Nearly 725 million motor coach trips are taken annually, almost matching the number of airline trips taken annually. As one of my colleagues here said, motor coaches stay on the highway for about 20 years. So when you make an improvement of safety in the motor coach, it's going to do safety protection for people day after day, year after year after year. And the total cost of the Senate bill is 10 cents a trip. I'm sure that every American would be willing to pay 10 cents a trip to be assured of the safety protections in that Senate bill. Unfortunately, motor coaches are not held to the same high safety standard as passenger vehicles or commercial aviation today. Because motor coaches carry up to 55 passengers when a crash does occur, it is both catastrophic and it is deadly. Attached to my statement is a chart describing over 178 motor coach crashes since 1990 that have killed 317 people and injured 3,000. For more than 40 years, the National Transportation Safety Board, that we rely on for these issues, has investigated fatal motor coach crashes and issued numerous recommendations, many on the agency's most wanted list, most wanted to be installed in new vehicles. Yet these recommendations to improve occupant protection in a crash have been ignored or delayed at the Department of Transportation. We know what to do to protect them, the people who ride in these buses. An enactment of the MAP 21 directs DOT to take actions with many reasonable deadlines on many of the most critical NTSB recommendations. The motor coach safety language adopted by the Senate includes what we call the Greyhound Compromise, which was negotiated and agreed to last summer. Not only did Greyhound endorse the occupant protection provisions of the bill, but Mr. David Leach, Greyhound's CEO, stood with family members, senators of both parties, and safety groups and stated that these improvements should be adopted industry-wide and that Greyhound supported, quote, the strongest safety legislation, unquote, not, quote, the weakest. The most effective legislation to correct deadly and dangerous deficiencies is contained in MAP 21. My prepared statement goes into great detail about this and compares the provisions with H.R. 7. Unfortunately, motor code safety provisions in H.R. 7 are not as comprehensive or specific and include unnecessary delays and protracted deadlines. On the other hand, the Greyhound Compromise requires timely action on key NTSB recommendations that will ensure passengers are protected with seat belts, anti-ejection window glazing, roof crush protection, tire pressure monitoring systems, and rollover prevention technology. And I would say that rollover is the source of most severe cause of injury in over 50% of these crashes. These safety technologies are affordable, costing, as I mentioned, a dime per passenger trip, and are already available as optional equipment by motor coach manufacturers who do not oppose the Senate bill. There's no excuse for delaying any longer. We strongly urge the subcommittee to support the provisions of MAP 21. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Claybrook. Ms. Gadia?
Good morning, Chairman Blackburn. And
Slide the microphone a little closer to you.
Is that better?
That's perfect.
Good morning, Chairman Blackburn and Ranking Member Butterfield. My name is Ami Gadia, and I am Senior Policy Counsel with Consumers Union, the public policy and advocacy arm of Consumer Reports. CU believes that the vehicle safety provisions passed by the Senate as a part of its surface transportation bill will provide NHTSA with critical new authorities to help promote consumer vehicle safety. However, CU also believes that there are ways in which the Senate language can be further strengthened to address certain critical consumer safety issues and urges the House to include these additional provisions in its own bill. CU supports the requirement that NHTSA issue rules regarding vehicle stopping distance, brake override, and pedal placement. We have recommended the issuance of safety standards in these areas for several years and believe that their adoption will provide important safety features in passenger vehicles. We are also glad to see a proposal to establish a Council for Vehicle Electronics, Vehicle Software, and Emerging Technologies, and a proposal to require NHTSA to set a performance standard for electronic systems in cars. We support the provisions for grants to states that enact and enforce anti-distracted driving laws and graduated driver's licensing laws for teenagers. We also strongly support a requirement that NHTSA prioritize the setting of new safety standards for car seats for children, as well as prioritize performing new research into emerging child safety concerns. CU applauds provisions making improvements to NHTSA's public database of consumer safety reports. This database is a vital tool for NHTSA, automakers, safety advocates, and the public to identify emerging hazard trends. This tool, in turn, can help save lives. However, this database has not been as consumer-friendly or as organized as it could be. The Senate-passed bill changes this by requiring NHTSA to improve the database's organization, functionality, and searchability. Consumers will also benefit if NHTSA makes vehicle recall information available on the web, and if the agency makes this recall information searchable by make, model, and VIN. All of these changes will make a big difference for consumers seeking information about the safety of the cars they own or plan to purchase. Recall efficacy is another important issue. According to NHTSA, the average consumer response rate to vehicle recalls is roughly 70%. Giving NHTSA the authority to require manufacturers to issue additional recall notices and to take additional steps to locate and notify each individual registered as the owner or lessee can also help improve recall completion rates, thereby helping to make our roads safer. We also support making data gathered under NHTSA's early warning reporting system available to the public. We have previously recommended that consumer complaint numbers submitted by manufacturers to NHTSA under the EWR system should be made public by NHTSA and should be easily searchable. Requiring EDRs or event data recorders in all new cars from model year 2015 onwards with appropriate privacy controls and disclosures, will mean that more of these data can help police and accident investigators reconstruct what happened in a crash. Finally, in the event that a manufacturer violates the law, raising the maximum civil penalty that NHTSA could levy for violations from $17 million to $250 million will help act as a deterrent against future violations that imperil public safety. It should be noted that the $250 million figure is the outermost limit of what NHTSA could possibly fine a company for a series of violations. As noted, we are happy to see several of our recommendations in the Senate-passed bill, but there are additional elements that are missing that we urge the committee to take up as it considers surface transportation legislation. First, gear shifters should be designed so that a driver can quickly identify the neutral position and easily shift gears to regain control of a car in a panic situation. There are also additional improvements needed in the child safety seat standards that NHTSA administers. CU recommends that the agency revise FMVSS 225 to allow anchors and tethers to be used with car seats for children to at least 65 pounds or greater. We next urge the House to include in its legislation language requiring rental car companies to make any recall-related repairs before they rent cars to consumers. Regarding distracted driving, NHTSA is currently in the process of finalizing its in-car distraction guidelines for manufacturers. In order to ensure the widest application of these guidelines, CU recommends that the guidelines be incorporated into NHTSA's New Car Assessment Program, or NCAP. CU would also like to see vehicle roof strength and seat back strength requirements improved. Specifically, we would like to see a dynamic rollover test, not simply a static roof crush test, as is currently the case. As the House moves forward with its consideration of its own bill, the CU urges you to include those provisions described in your legislation, as well as the additional provisions we have described. We thank the committee for the opportunity to present our recommendations and look forward to assisting you as you move forward.
Thank you for your testimony. At this time, we are going to recess to go vote. We've got just under 2 minutes left on the clock to cast our vote. What we're going to try to do is cast the vote and come back during the recommittal. We'll see how that works when we get to the floor. We've got 3 amendment votes and then a recommittal. So our goal is to not hold you needlessly. We do have some questions we would like to get on the record. But at this time, we will consider the committee in recess.
Oh, thank you. This was my mother's, and it was made in 1950 in a little tiny store up in northern Maine that went around and they collected stones off the beach in the 40s and 50s, and then they started making them.
I will call us back into order in session. Thank you all for bearing with us, and recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Bainwall, Mr. Stanton, would like to begin with you. We've talked about the safety mandates in the Senate bill. Mr. Strickland has talked about some of the safety guidelines. I know many of those came from the industry, but I want to look specifically at the safety mandates that are in the Senate version of the bill right now. And what I would like to know, going back to your comment, Mr. Bainwall, about affordability of safe cars, what would these mandates, what would they add to the sticker price of a new car? And then how do the new regulatory mandates affect your efforts and your abilities to develop and implement your own safety technologies that you bring forward through R&D? And then the third component of this, since we're looking at the average age of a car on the road right now being 10.5 years, do you have concerns regarding the increasing cost and affordability of cars and whether that puts the price of safety beyond the means of many Americans in this economy? So Mr. Bainwall and then Mr. Stanton.
There's a lot to that, but let me try to unpack it a bit. I do think the critical thing here is making sure that we can trigger the replacement process. Mandates that build the cost of a vehicle that make it unaffordable means that we're not realizing the objective, which is to save lives. And so I think everybody at the table has a common objective, and that is, how do you maximize the savings of life? And for us, that means a prudent, data-driven process where you make priorities and you determine where you get the most bang for the buck, and you do the research to make sure that there's no unintended consequences and that it's efficacious and that there will be a consumer demand for it. What that really means, in short, is that from a practical perspective, we think NHTSA's plan is a pretty good one. And we think that the notion of adding political regulatory earmarks, which is basically what the Senate's done, is not a great idea, because it interferes with the ability to execute the NHTSA plan. It does raise costs. We can't really project what the cost would be because we don't know how they would define the mandate. But it does raise costs, it does confuse the mission, and I don't think it leads to an outcome that we all prefer, which is safer cars.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton.
Yeah, I'd put it in a little bit bigger context. As you know, that we have are on the chart to hit 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025, and the cost increase that the government estimated just to go to 2016 was be about $1,000 per car, and from 2017 to 2025 about another $2,000. And I just testified before the National Academy of Sciences, and they're looking at standards from 2020 to 2030 and where we're going. And I think we're working with the administration on fuel cell vehicles and EVs, and California wants 15.4% of their vehicles to be electric vehicles or fuel cell vehicles by 2025. So there's costs that are involved in that, and then when you add the safety requirements, and our organization and all of our members are really about enhancing vehicle safety. We've been working with NHTSA on all of the rulemakings. We, as my testimony I hope conveyed, is that we don't want fruitless requirements or redundant requirements, but the affordability at the end of the day, we're doing okay. When 2009 was a really bad year. 10 was a little bit better. 11 and 12, we're looking now maybe at 13.5 million units, and that's good for the industry. But we need to keep the affordability of the vehicles. The affordability has to be there, or we will not accomplish our fuel efficiency goals or our safety goals. So it's a big concern. And as we go through it, we work with our member companies and we work with the regulators to make sure that we get the best value for the buck.
Thank you. And I only have 27 seconds left, but at this time, Mr. Butterfield, I'm going to yield to you for questions.
Thank you. Motor coach ridership is up, and yet motor coaches are not being held to the same safety standards as passenger vehicles. H.R. 7 does not require bus manufacturers to comply with key safety requirements for 6 years after enactment, and operators are not required to fully adopt the new buses for 18 years. Ms. Claybrook, is that correct or incorrect?
That is correct. The 18-year provision is for retroactivity. The 6 years is for the new buses.
And what's your take on all of this?
Well, my take is that the National Transportation Safety Board for 40 years has been telling both the Department of Transportation and the bus industry to improve their bus safety. And very, very little has ever happened. And I don't think it's going to happen unless you have these mandates. The compromise that the consumer groups and the families of the victims had with in the Senate bill were very reasonable. It was signed off on by the Greyhound Corporation, the CEO personally, said it was totally feasible. And we think that the Senate bill then, with that compromise in it, is perfect. And that anything less than that is unfortunate. And as I mentioned, the cost of the Senate bill is 10 cents per passenger. This is an industry that has huge numbers of passenger riders every year. These buses last for 20 years. If you fix them up, they're going to provide safety again and again and again, day after day after day. And so it's well worth the investment.
Thank you. She will have time. All right. Number two, a number of the provisions in the Senate bill were based on technical assistance provided by NHTSA. Administrator Strickland's testimony mentioned one such provision, giving NHTSA new authority to address hazards caused by vehicles or equipment imported by an entity other than the original manufacturer. Ms. Gadea, and I may be mispronouncing that, do you believe it is important for NHTSA to be able to work with Homeland Security to take action against imported vehicles or vehicle equipment that may be hazardous? What types of limitations are we currently facing in ensuring that imported goods do not violate consumer protection laws?
Yes, I think that is an important addition in the Senate legislation. Obviously, you've got concerns, and consumers would like to know that the vehicles that they're driving, whether domestically produced or foreign imports, are meeting all the safety requirements. What I do understand also is that in the Senate legislation, that particular section regarding import safety makes the provision that if a car due to be imported is subject to a recall and that recall repair is made, that there's no longer any kind of holdup. So we think that's an appropriate consumer protection.
All right. I'm going to yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Butterfield yields back. Ms. Schakowsky for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Bainwall, I wanted to ask you a question, but let me just first say that I hope all of us are happy that the automobile industry is doing well. I was one of those proud to support for the industry, and glad to see the industry back on its feet, big time. At the end of your testimony, you said safer, but you really meant affordable. Had to correct yourself. I think consumers don't want to have to choose particularly. But you said in your testimony, I'm going to quote, "As a nation, we can better utilize the full benefits of vehicle safety technologies when we get vehicle occupants properly restrained and drunk drivers off the road while safety belt usage is increasing. Only half of vehicle occupants killed in crashes, over half of vehicle occupants killed in crashes are not restrained by safety belts or child safety seats," unquote. And then on page 7 of your testimony, you state that Section 31503 of the Senate bill, which would require a rear seat belt reminder system, should be deleted. You know, I find that really contradictory and hypocritical, frankly. Would you respond?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. It is true, and you can slice the data a number of different ways, but it's definitely true that of the 33,000 fatalities, that a huge proportion of those come from either drunk driving or folks who are not seatbelted or some combination. And so to pin the exact number, it's a little tough because you have both causalities. So point one is dealing with both of those behavioral questions is probably the best thing we can possibly do to improve.
You agree. I have very limited time.
Well,
okay, so we agree on that.
I'm trying to be responsive. So the best thing we can do is deal with these behavioral problems.
Okay.
The seatbelt issue to which you refer is a element of that issue, but it's really not the same issue. We're talking about latches, I believe, that are you talking about the latches?
No, I'm talking about
the rear seatbelt warnings.
Yes.
Okay. As I understand, the rear seatbelt warnings are not part of the NHTSA rulemaking plan. One.
Ms. Claybrook, would you comment on that?
There's no reason if you have belt reminders in the front seat not to have them in the back seat. In the back seat, you have children primarily who are riding. I don't understand why the industry is behaving this way. In fact,
no, you're done. I'm asking Ms. Claybrook now.
In fact, the belt reminders have really worked, and we should protect the most precious cargo in the vehicle, and that's our children.
Let me ask you another question. Isn't it true that auto industry initially resisted seatbelts altogether, airbags, and now market the safety of vehicles that they produce as something good? So is a market-driven approach to safety the way to go?
No. well, market only, you mean? No.
Yeah.
You have to require them because the industry has been a reluctant partner in safety forever. It's wonderful for the industry in many ways. They stop fussing and fuming, and they get around to doing the engineering. And that's what we really want, is for them to have a clear mandate that gives them a deadline, and then they know they have to do it, and they stop trying to use their lawyers, and they start using their engineers.
Great. Let me get to the latch, and I wanted to ask Ms. Gadja, and good luck on your new addition to the family.
Thank you.
The safety of child restraint systems has come a long way, there's no question. And many parents now use the latch system to install car seats, but the latch system's approved weight limits are lower than the weight limit on many car seats that are being installed using latch. The Senate bill has provisions suggesting the use of larger car seats and older and heavier children using them. I wonder if you could speak on the importance of these efforts, and do you think that most parents know that their car seats may need to be reinstalled as their child ages?
The provisions in the Senate bill are absolutely critical, and we appreciate that. We appreciate the Senate provisions and what they do require NHTSA to do with regards to child safety seats. What's also critical is making sure that NHTSA is exploring a dynamic side impact test with regards to child safety seats. But I think you're absolutely right that consumers are not aware with the compatibility of those latch anchors, those latch tethers, which are so important for safety with car seats. And that's something that is partially addressed by the Senate bill, but we'd also like to see NHTSA further address.
I want to thank our witnesses for being with us today and to remind our members that there are 10 days to submit questions. I know many of us have additional questions. I know that some of you have additional comments that you would like to submit for the record. So we will have that 10 days, but in order to keep from holding you here through a new series of votes, we are going to complete our work. And I'm going to ask unanimous consent to include in the hearing record the statement of Representative Bill Schuster and statements from the following organizations, all of which we have shared in advance with the minority: the Rubber Manufacturers Association, the Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association, Durrell Juvenile Group, Anchor Trailways and Tours, National Automobile Dealers Association, Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. So ordered. We again thank you. We look forward to continuing a hearing next week. We're going to be looking at some of the privacy issues that are in front of us. Your patience has been appreciated, and we appreciate the information you brought to us. Hearing is adjourned.